From clicks to crooks, let's take a journey to the 2023 fraud landscape, see what happened, and let's take a look ahead at 2024. Together, let's take a journey and navigate to the dark, fraudy waters and sail from customer frustration to fulfillment. I'm Xavi from Signified. Thank you for having me here today. Signified provides an end-to-end e-commerce protection solution that helps merchants to build trust with their customers and grow fearlessly. We're using AI fraud prevention technology. In my role, I'm managing a team of fraud-fighting ninjas focused on being a step ahead of fraudsters day in, day out, and fighting the good fight. We're using AI and big data. And because of that, we're able to see the identity and intent behind every transaction, both good and bad transactions. We're filtering out the bad and allowing more orders to be approved. That helps to increase the revenue for the merchants. We're doing this by creating new features, unique features. And the power of these features are coming from getting these features connected throughout the entire customer journey. So let's take a look back at 2023. What happened? The cost of fraud is becoming more and more transparent, but it's also very painful to see. We did an analysis and found that for every $100 in fraudulent orders, it results in $207 in tangible losses. The same can be said for euros. The math here is both simple but also very brutal. It's not only the value of the goods that you lose out in terms of fraud, it's also about the operational cost, the shipment cost, the fulfillment cost. Think also about the marketing cost and the customer acquisition cost. And if that's not painful enough, the fear of fraud is also present. We did a separate analysis where we analyzed declined traffic not routed through a machine learning solution and found that 73% of this declined traffic is actually legitimate. This is all revenue left on the table. And more of these type of reports are coming out there. The fear of fraud is present, and the numbers are high. After the after the pandemic, e-commerce really accelerated. More and more users are shopping online now. And merchants are laser focused on increasing the customer lifetime value. And they have all kinds of tricks for that. They drive customer engagement, they offer loyalty points, gift cards, they offer bonuses and benefits and discounts, and they store all kinds of personal information. What do you think is happening in the mind of the fraudsters when all of these additional data points are being stored? With customer data enrichment, these customer accounts are getting more and more attractive to fraudsters as well, which in turn is leading to an increased risk for merchants. Payment fraud, reseller abuse, promo abuse, gift card abuse, identity theft, the list can go on. In turn, it can have a negative impact on that customer lifetime value. That customer lifetime value that you worked so hard on, maximizing and improving. Your brand reputation, but also the financial impact. Think about the lost money to fraud, or the higher operational cost, for example, to combat fraud. Different regions, they offer different challenges and also unique strategies on how to tackle these. Just very high level from Europe, the market forces and the challenges. SEA has been rolled out. I come back to that in a minute. But we see in Europe that the buy, try, and return culture is accelerating, which is driving some new abuse vectors down the market. An example, like some of the European retailers that we now work with, they had wardrobing problems. It's a new form of refund abuse. Wardrobing is a form of refund abuse where a customer is buying a product, wearing it once or twice for a special occasion, and then returning it to request a refund. Now the merchant is issuing the refund, but cannot sell the item anymore at full price. We see contactless delivery after the pandemic accelerating, which is also driving some new abuse trends. Think about a user that is buying a product and gets it delivered and then falsely claimed to have not get this delivered. How did the German fraud landscape look like? When we looked into our data and compared the last 12 months with the previous 12 months, we saw that there was an overall fraud pressure increase of 8%. Now, when we looked into it, we saw that the fraud pressure is coming mainly from the average order value that increased, not so much of the pressure of the frequency or the count. So less frequent attacks, but much larger attacks. And when we then further drill down into this 8%, we see that it's mainly being driven from consumer abuse claims, friendly fraud claims. Here is where the user is then buying a product, but also disputing the charge with their bank. Criminal fraud chargebacks went down with 28%. SCA has been implemented in Europe to curb fraud. But when speaking to merchants, they feel that they not only need to work continuously on fraud prevention, but work even harder to ensure a smooth customer experience, because it can have an impact on conversions. When looking at these numbers, we can say that balance is key when it comes to leveraging the right exemption strategy. Having the right strategy means leveraging exemptions and performing 2FA only when necessary, when minimizing friction during the checkout process. Where was the main fraud pressure before PSD2? Here, at checkout. Where do you think fraud is now moving into after PSD2? You got it right. Towards the pre-purchase and the post-purchase side. At the pre-purchase side, here is where account takeover is happening. So fraudsters that are taking over your users' accounts, using the credit cards that are being stored, using the loyalty points that are being stored for all fraudulent purposes. On the post-purchase side, here is where we see fraudsters and abusers creating fake identities, fake accounts to leverage that for promo abuse, refund abuse, return abuse, etc. Now, I have to admit that this part of the problem is relatively new in the e-commerce, but it's accelerating, and it's good for us to be mindful of. Fraud at scale. So my team has been pretty busy last year fighting fraud. Let me ask you, when you think of the word fraudster, what's the mental image that comes in your mind? I'm pretty sure that some of you folks in the audience had this guy in mind, in the middle. That fraudster with a hoodie on, committing fraud in their dark garage. An evolution is taking place. Fraudsters are nowadays employees. They're getting salaries. They're part of a criminal enterprise, and that criminal enterprise are building their own machine learning solutions. When we looked into the attacks last year at Signified, we saw a pattern where fraudsters were testing the waters. They had a few bots in place here and there, and then boom, attack at scale. Over the last 2 years, I would say like fraud attack volume has 10x'd. And last year we saw more and more attacks where 100,000 of orders being attacked were normal. And we feel that this is becoming the norm moving forward. And for merchants, that can pose a big problem, because if you find out late that you're being attacked, sometimes even with just a couple of hours, it can have a big impact. How to combat this? The famous battle of AI versus AI. As fraud companies are thinking of how to increase their profit margins, how to increase their revenue, attacking harder, faster, and smarter is on top of their mission statement. Again, they're businesses. Merchants therefore need to adopt and innovate into a machine learning solution that can help to stop fraud and combat it in real time. But not only that, but also about blocking not any good users. Because especially in these economic uncertain times, merchants need to be relentless in finding new ways to leave no revenue behind. Before I jump into some of the 2024 predictions, I would like to do a quick poll. If you can help me out. So take out your phones. You have the QR code here. I'm curious to hear from you, looking back at 2023, what have been the main business challenges for you from a fraud or abuse perspective? And I'm curious to see if it's matching with some of the things that we have seen. Give it a couple of seconds, and please don't put the phone away. I have one more poll to ask you as well at the end of the presentation. Lost money to consumer abuse seems to be at 60%. Second is the higher operational cost to combat fraud. Interesting. Okay, I think we have a clear winner. Lost money to consumer abuse. Okay. 2024 predictions. All right. So it doesn't surprise to you probably that the majority of the online sales are being returned in comparison to the in-store sales. 17% of the online sales are being returned. Now, merchants and solution providers are becoming better at stopping payment fraud. And with that, consumer abuse is on the rise. In fact, when speaking to some merchants, they feel that consumer abuse is fast becoming a bigger problem for them than payment abuse. We did a survey, and we'd love to share the results with you. 25% of the respondents admitted to have requested a refund with the goal of keeping a satisfactory product, and they got a refund for it. 22% falsely claimed a delivered product was unsatisfactory. 21% falsely claimed an order never arrived, and 24% admitted that they ordered a product and returned a different product than what they ordered. This reminds me of the case that we saw where somebody ordered a phone and returned a potato in a box. It's a true story. With 3DS in Europe, fraud will shift. And our prediction for 2024 is that we'll see a shift happening away from fraud, more towards abuse. And you have kind of different abuse scenarios: return abuse, reseller abuse, loyalty abuse. Where it all boils down to is abusers that are taking advantage of your merchant's business policies. Abusers that are taking advantage of the customer is always right policy. And if that's not enough, we see more and more of these type of things popping up. Fraud as a service. In this case, a refund abuse service. So what does this mean is that a user is contacting this professional refunder that's doing the refund on their behalf in exchange of a cut of the refund. Now, these professional refunders, they know the merchant's business policies, they know where the gaps are, they can generate fake tracking, fake label information. In a case that we recently worked with, they even have an inside person in the delivery company that they work with to help the packages being marked as damaged or lost. Now, again, this is becoming challenging for merchants because they not only need to deal with this individual consumer abuser, they also need to deal with these professional refunders that act with tactic and with scale. And you also don't want to become too strict with the right mitigation efforts to combat abuse, because you could lose out on those loyal customers. Having a smooth return experience is nowadays essential, and it's part of the purchasing process. The rise of Gen AI, the topic that we're all talking about. Synthetic account. We all need accounts to shop online nowadays. With the AI coming up, fraudsters can now, with a single script, can create mass accounts in scale and use that for all different fraudulent reasons. Just to take it a step further, we recently were involved in a case working with a merchant where fraudsters were calling in to their customer service reps and placing extremely high value orders. I'm talking about 200K on average per order here. And to make it sound legit, they cloned the voices of their victims. This is something already happening, and we see already coming. Bots. Bots have been around the block for some period of time already. Fake account creation, credential stuffing, card testing attacks. The interesting part here is that fraudsters, they don't need that strong technical background anymore. They can just have AI generate the code for them. AI-powered fraud attacks. We talked about the battle of AI versus AI before. Now, our prediction is in 2024, this will see a whole new level where fraud and anti-fraud solutions are going to go head-to-head. Phishing attacks. Gone are those days that you receive an email in your inbox full of grammar and spelling mistakes, and you're like, nope, phishing. You'll get these beautiful, well-written emails in your inbox that it's making much more difficult for you to distinguish whether it's coming from a fraud or a genuine source. The only prompt that you need to have as a fraudster is like, hey, ChatGPT, can you write for me this email template with this topic towards this audience, for example, employees? Oh, don't worry about that malicious link. I'll add that myself. Sure, says ChatGPT. Here you go. And we now get the likes of Warm GPT, Fraud GPT, that does the whole thing for you, as what we learned as well this morning in the Visa presentation. Before I wrap up, one more poll that I would like your help on. Do you anticipate an increase in refund abuse incidents, such as false claims and return fraud in 2024? Might match up a little bit with the question and the results that we saw earlier. 100% yes. 9% no. All right. I think, yeah, it's matching up with our predictions as well, and definitely what we saw in the earlier poll. I think we definitely have a clear winner here with above 80% on yes. All right, I'm going to wrap up. The acceleration of fraud innovations. Merchants became better in 2023 at identifying the intent and identity behind every transaction. it becomes more and more important to deploy network intelligence across the full shopper journey. The rise of abuse and Gen AI. So consumers are becoming better and more comfortable with shopping online. They're also becoming more comfortable in gaming the system. Rising prices, a tough economy, yes, they all have been contributors and driving this abuse trend. Additionally, we see Gen AI on the rise. Merchants therefore need to adopt and innovate into a machine learning solution that can detect and stop fraud in real time. Final point. The game is about revenue optimization. The game is about balancing fraud and friction. Modern risk intelligence team, they don't have that defensive approach anymore. The best risk managers are actually business optimizers and finding ways how they can maximize revenue and minimize blocking good users. And the game here is all about leveraging the right tools and tapping into large data networks. So working in fraud prevention is my passion. I can go on for hours, but I'll leave it at that. Please find me at the booth. I have much more stories to tell you, and also join our networking event later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Xavi. We have a bit of time, so if anyone wants a quick question, one thing I'll ask you, we've got globalization of everything, so I assume we've got globalization of fraudsters, and fraud tools. Is there anything in any part of the world that they're doing differently? Or what is it in Europe that is more specific to Europe than other parts?
Yeah, I think it's good. Like, I think it's a good question. Like, we definitely see from a fraud perspective some regional differences. We're operating heavily, for example, like in Europe, in North America, and in LATAM, for example. And if we compare, like, for example, with APAC as well, but if we compare, like, for example, LATAM and North America, we see different fraud trends. But also with Europe and North America and LATAM or APAC, I think, like, with what I mentioned earlier, with like some of the SCA impact that has been coming up in Europe, that's really driving fraudsters to move around, move ahead. So that's, according to our data, we're seeing a more of an abuse shift compared to some of the other regions. So I think like having that regional expertise and regional focus and deep diving into that, I think that's essential, and really having that. And with that, you can really understand the pattern behavior. From a fraud analytical point of view, it really kind of goes into understanding the fraud modus operandi. So really, putting the fraud hat on, seeing the story behind the data, and work with data science partners, for example, in our case, to see how we can optimize machine learning and building newer features around that. So we have like different abuse features compared to other markets, for example, in Europe.
And in the AI war, is it a draw at the moment?
Oh,
with push and pull from both sides.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think we're keeping each other like. Up there, but I would say like at the minute it's an equal match, but it's a dynamic world that can shift pretty much from one day to the next.
Thanks.
Thank you.